Welcome back to a new post today. Today let's look at the most important topics that you need to keep track for November 7th and many related to the Supreme Court judgments as well. The very first is about the Supreme Court saying that the state has no right to acquire the private property, in which it also overturned the Justice Krishna Iyer doctrine. So let's see what is the Justice Krishna Iyer doctrine and what is it related to. So this case is related to the Directive Principles of State Policy Article 39. In which it relates to the usage of private resources for the community good. So in an 8-1 majority decision, the Supreme Court ruled that only certain private resources and not all of the private resources could be considered for state acquisition, therefore limiting the power of the state on the private resources in the country. The court ruled that not all private property can be considered as material resource of the community under Article 39B of the Directive Principles of State Policy. The court ruled that this should be assessed by a case-by-case basis. The court also overturned its earlier decision in the Sanjeev Coke Manufacturing Company versus the Bharat Coke Manufacturing Limited, which held that privately owned resources must be considered as community resources. And it stressed on procedural rights. It laid down 7 basic procedural rights that the state should respect before depriving citizens of their private property. So what does Article 39 say? It's a Directive Principles of State Policy. It says that the state shall direct the policy towards securing the ownership and control of the material resources of the community and are so distributed to best subserve the common good. So this was the article in news, and in the majority view it also overturned the 1982 ruling in the Sanjeev Coke case, which had leaned on the Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer interpretation of the 1977 Ranganath Reddy case. So Justice Krishna Iyer had argued that all private property could be considered as material resources of the community and they can be used for redistribution. However, the majority view stated that Justice Krishna Iyer was influenced by specific economic ideology, and it reiterated that India's or country's constitutional framework supports economic democracy and does not favor only one economic system. And in this ruling, the state therefore limited the state's control over the private resources, and it said that not all private resources can be used for community well-being or subserving the community purpose. So this is about one. Then the other one is about the UP Madrasa Act, which the Uttar Pradesh government came, and Supreme Court upheld the validity of this act and said that this does not violate the minority rights, and said that the state has the power to regulate madrasas, and the minorities do not have the absolute right under Article 30 of the Indian Constitution. So what are the highlights of this case while Supreme Court upheld the Madrasa Act? It said that the 2004 Madrasa Act was criticized. The 2004 Madrasa Act brought in by the UP government was criticized as violating the minorities' rights to establish and administer madrasas. The Supreme Court said that the state has a right to regulate the madrasas to ensure excellence of standards of education in these institutes of minorities. And the act with regard to the higher education, however, was in direct conflict with the UGC, the instructions with regard to higher education, and therefore this was a provision that the act violated. The Supreme Court said that the UP Act wandered into the domain of the union list under entry 66, which gives exclusive power to higher education to the union government. The Supreme Court further said that the UP Act is constitutional and ensured that the students had access to minimum level of competency by regulating the madrasas. It said the right of minorities to establish and administer madrasas is not absolute under Article 30. This is a landmark judgment. It said that the Constitution strikes a balance between the rights of minorities and the state's power to regulate the bodies to maintain standards of excellence. The bench said that the education in the concurrent list must be given a wider meaning, and the law validity cannot be challenged for violating the basic structure of the Constitution. These are some of the highlights that were made, and maybe you will have to remember them for the MCQs because the UPSC is widening its ambit with regard to the subject matter as well. Now, the winter session of the Parliament is beginning, and we have 3 sessions, that is the monsoon session, the budget session and the winter session, and also sometimes a special session as well. Article 85 125 of the Constitution regulates the sessions of the Parliament. It says that the House of the Parliament must meet at least twice a year. The President can summon the Houses or either House. The President can prorogue the House or either House, and the President can dissolve the House of the People. There cannot be a gap of more than 6 months between the first session and the first sitting of the next session. So there has to be at least 2 sessions in a year. President Draupadi Murmu now inaugurated the first Asian Buddhist Summit in New Delhi on November 5th and 6th. The summit theme was Role of Buddha Dhamma in Strengthening of Asia. The Ministry of Culture along with the International Buddhist Confederation had organized the summit. The forum included 2 parallel forums which explored Buddha's teachings and also Lord Buddha's principles as well. The purpose of the summit is to promote understanding, foster dialogue, address contemporary challenges in the Buddhist community. And next is the drug Risdiplam, that was the news recently. It is a drug that is used to treat a very rare spinal disease called as spinal muscular atrophy, and it is produced by Roche multinational healthcare company, which is a Swiss. Now, what did this Roche do? It filed an injunction case against Natco Pharma, which was producing the generic version of this drug. Now, let me tell you that the original version of Risdiplam is very costly. It costs about 6 lakhs per dose, and it's not accessible to the people with this rare disease. Therefore, the generic version is much more cheaper and is accessible. However, Roche has now filed an injunction case against Natco Pharma, saying that it should stop producing the generic version. Now, health activists are raising their voices against the pharmaceutical community. Companies who are raising the prices of generic drugs to lakhs of rupees, which are being inaccessible to the people who have these diseases, and therefore called for allowing the companies to produce the generic versions so that treatment could be held affordable, and also checking the patent rights of these companies, which they hold for quite a long time, and therefore do not allow the generic version to be produced, and along with the evergreening of the patents on these medicines, making them almost inaccessible to many and only few. So this is about Risdiplam, that was in conflict with Roche and also Natco Pharma. And the next one is about Land of Fire. Who is called Land of Fire? That is Azerbaijan. It recently launched the COP29. Let me tell you, it's the country that has a rich amount of natural gas reserves and is now planning to transition to green energy. And the COP29 was held in Abersin Peninsula near Baku. The next is about Kayam and Pars. So these are the satellites that were launched by the Russian Soyuz rocket for Iran. So these are some of the topics that I thought I should be sharing for you for November 7th. If you did, please do like, share and subscribe, and don't forget to comment at the end of the video. I shall see you tomorrow in another new post with another new list of important topics. Until then, it's very happy learning.